right
This
now.
one's a doozy.
Yes. Okay. So the Rings of Power, the very, very diverse, inclusive, stunning, and brave Rings of Power, the show everybody loved, the show that everybody cannot wait for season 2, the one that got so many Golden Globe nominations that it didn't get any Golden Globe nominations, has announced its director's team for season 2 of the show. And it is very diverse. It is super inclusive. It's all women.
So diverse. If our expectations for the next season of Rings of Power could get lower than rock bottom. So their team just outdoes themselves with new ways to discourage people from watching. Isn't that crazy?
So the names of it's Charlotte Brandstrom, Sana Hamri, and Louise Hooper. That is the name of your 3 directors. Now, Charlotte Brandstrom was a director in season 1, but the 2 male directors that were also part of season 1 have been kicked to the curb. I love the idea that you take a problem that was created by identity politics and you try to fix it with identity politics.
Well, here are the red flags with each of them, actually.
Go for it.
Charlotte Brandstrom she's going to be working on 4 episodes in Rings of Power season 2. She previously worked on The Witcher, which, as we just discussed, had a problem of hating the source material.
I love it.
Here is what someone who worked on The Witcher said about that problem. He said, "My general rule was you had to be a fan, no questions. I've been on shows, namely The Witcher, where some of the writers were not or actively disliked the books and games, even actively mocking the source material. It's a recipe for disaster and bad morale. Fandom as a litmus test checks egos and makes all the long nights worth it. You have to respect the work before you're allowed to add to its legacy." So, obviously, in Rings of Power, we have not accomplished this standard.
Not quite.
Very low standard of not mocking or hating the source material or its author.
Maybe this is also a fact that we just did a video the other day about a guy who wrote a story. It was like, there's not enough women in the Rings of Power. And
this was their response?
They got the wrong memo, and they're like, oh, you meant in front of the camera. Sorry, we hired all broads behind the camera.
We just took down that article 1 by 1 points, and then now we get this news, which, you know, Rings of Power obviously couldn't be woke enough, and it never will be. But anyway, all female directors in context just means that the new team is going to influence the majority male cast members that they're bringing on. It's 16 new cast members, and only 3 of them are female.
I have a question.
The influence is going to be that these male characters are just going to behave less like men.
Yes, because that's the funny part. The women characters will be directed by women to act like men, and the male characters directed by women will be directed to act like women. This is also funny. I was told by Hollywood that you couldn't possibly write, direct, or understand anyone that lived a life experience other than the life experience that you yourself lived. So unless there is a black female elf and a black male elf and a bunch of different iterations of people that are actually not real things directing episodes, I don't buy that you can
Unless
do this.
you're a Harfoot, you can't write any of the lines for Nori.
You
basically.
can't. Well,
that's where the logic takes you.
How could a woman possibly direct Halbrand to as he becomes Sauron to take over? How could they do that?
Exactly.
How could they understand what it means to be a man?
And I was just complaining about this before we went live, that Halbrand should have been, you know, they shouldn't have done this stupid plot twist at the end where Halbrand is Sauron, okay? Yeah. They should have allowed Halbrand to just be a good, trustworthy, competent male character.
That's not a thing.
For Galadriel, if they're going to have this romantic subplot between them, she can be a little less stony and cold and flat-faced.
I will also
around
point out,
him.
I will live and die by the idea that the world is not fair. Men can survive in these movies by being stone-faced and obstinate and not really, really warm or in any way, shape, or form likable. You can make a male character like that and it works. You can't really do that with a female character. Sorry,
when you make
breaks.
A cold, closed-minded, or stony male character, though, you're shown so many examples where they're called on that behavior and they learn from it.
Yes.
But when a female character behaves with the same disposition, she's only proven right over and over and over again. It's extremely repetitive, and
Take that, you incels.
Galadriel is just like that. Halbrand obviously should have not been made, this plot twist Sauron at the end. It was stupid. Anyway, this other director, Louise Hooper, is also credited with working on The Witcher. And she also worked on Netflix's Sandman series, which I saw a lot of fans say got destroyed.
Yeah, but people loved that. That show's generally pretty highly regarded.
It was divisive.
It's literally every character's gay.
A lot of fans say that they destroyed that property. And then the next director, Sana Hamri, worked on The Wheel of Time, yet another fantasy adaptation that a lot of fans hated. And she also worked on Glee, on Shameless, and on Desperate Housewives.
They also talk, nothing wrong with Desperate Housewives, am I right? No. I've actually never seen an episode of Desperate Housewives. But another thing that's funny about this is they talk about the sheer amount of criticism for the show that the first season got, how it wasn't in line with they talk about, the audience score was so low, but the critic score was so high. That doesn't really matter, because when you take a show with the size and scope of The Lord of the Rings, your criticism will exponentially go up. Meaning that if you had called this generic generic fantasy series number 3 by Amazon, the criticism probably still would have been there, but it would have been far, far less. But you are the one who made your own bed. Now it's time to lie in it. You bought the property. You want all the good publicity that comes with it. You now have to take the bad publicity. But now here's the problem. We're not going to be allowed to have bad publicity again. They're going to double down in that if you have any critique at all of anything they do in season 2, if Galadriel suddenly becomes even worse, you're not allowed to criticize that because you're being a sexist. You're being a misogynist.
Well, you're not allowed to criticize the character of Galadriel at all because of all of these fangirls that think that Mary Sue doesn't exist. It's exactly what she is. Worse. So with all of these cast changes, if you didn't think the cast was bloated enough, and the new director team, and also the rumor that they're replacing the showrunners, it seems like the next season of Rings of Power is going to be unrecognizable, not even resembling the first season. And at first, that sounds like it's good news. Yeah. Like on its surface, oh, great, it's not going to be like the first season. But no, it actually means that you're just going to get an entirely new, distinct pile of shit that is bad and unbearable to watch for a myriad of new and exciting reasons.
All the men are braiding each other's hair, and they're actually talking about how cute the rings are.
Yeah. I mean, those rings were fruity, to say the least. Like, if you watched, they look like high school graduation rings. I didn't like that detail at all. Anyway, I saw some people supporting this decision. One Stan account said, Rings of Power is doing everything they can to piss off the incel haters. I know, that's right. We stand the right show.
I love the idea that they think that translates to money somehow.
Right. And then someone replied they forgot to make a good show along the way. Yep. And another person replied, funny, because Galadriel is one of the most powerful beings in the Lord of the Rings movies, but here she became an annoying Mary Sue. And they posted a fan cam of Galadriel in response. So that's great.
I can't wait for all the thumbnails I'm going to get to make of her riding horses. It's going to be fantastic.
There are going to be so many more damning screen caps.
Well, also, let's talk about Sarah Michelle Gellar, because it speaks to what happened about behind the scenes and toxic men behind the scenes, right?
So she recently spoke at the Wrap's Power of Women Summit.
I want a Power of Men Summit in Hollywood where they just smoke cigars and talk about all the secretaries they've had sex with.
Sarah Michelle Gellar must have been talking with Morfydd Clark about this. She came out and said that Buffy the Vampire Slayer had an extremely toxic male set.
Yep.
So here's what she said. For so long, I was on a set that I think was known for being an extremely toxic male set. So that was ingrained in my head that was what all sets were like. And because that women were pitted against each other. If women became friends, then we became too powerful.
Sorry.
So you had to keep us down.
Women don't like each other. It's just a fact of life. Deal with it.
Or at least women on Hollywood sets.
I'm kidding.
Well, no, like that's a real phenomenon that is exaggerated on a Hollywood set.
Nothing to do with women. Just everyone's out to make their own bag.
Right.
You're not, like, you can't afford to be best buds with the people that, especially when you're younger and you're still sowing your oats, as they say, like you are not allowed to just become buddy bud with somebody because they might stab you in the back. You're going for the same roles. You're in a very, very cutthroat, highly capitalist industry. You don't get to just be best friends with these people. Oddly enough, it works later on because they all become part of the same friend group and in groups. But early on, you're still developing connections. Oh, you know this person? I need to know this person. It's all networking. There's not an ounce of reality or realness to any of these people. But everyone knows that Joss Whedon is a scumbag.
I mean, this isn't to exonerate Joss Whedon. Yes, he's a scumbag and a self-proclaimed male feminist. Like, this is an ongoing problem.
That was your first clue. That
should have been your first red flag.
He's a male feminist. That's
this
a problem.
guy is obviously toxic. The definition of toxic masculinity is a male feminist.
Did you know that when Charisma Carpenter got pregnant, he asked her if she's going to keep it?
Dude, yeah.
He's such a skill. He wasn't allowed to be left in the same room as Michelle Trachtenberg because she was 16, and he was just like so like apparently not like a sexual thing, but he was just so mean that she would like leave in tears and then like wouldn't be able to work. He's just like a genuinely bad dude that nobody actually likes.
Charisma Carpenter said that he abused his power on numerous occasions, pitting people against one another to compete and vie for his attention and approval.
But it is funny how like they wait 20 years to make these complaints. They gave countless interviews in the last 20 years. Love Joss Whedon. We were such a family on that set because you're all lying.
Yeah.
You're all liars. And here's the thing. Yes, he's a scumbag. Yes, he probably was a jerk to all of you and made a show that is culturally more relevant than almost anything that's come out in the last 20 years. That show spun off Angel, a show that by all regards probably wouldn't even be able to succeed today because whenever they do spin-offs nowadays, nobody likes them. But it spun off, and David Boreanaz owes a lot of his career to the fact that he was in that show and then onto Angel and then went on to do other great things. And you know what? I don't like Joss Whedon. He's kind of a scumbag. I absolutely hate the fact that all characters in Hollywood nowadays are written like, everyone will tell me, yes, it's because of Kevin Smith. They say that everybody's written like Kevin Smith characters a la the late 90s. I would argue that most of the writers today are basing it off of, the younger writers today are basing it off of Joss Whedon characters rather than the Kevin Smith characters. I believe that the writers who grew up during when Kevin Smith stuff was popular were still talented enough that they didn't need to copy another writer's style. I don't believe that today's writers have that same ability. So they just copy Joss Whedon stuff. And yeah, male feminists. Never trust a male feminist. You don't need to go to the Empowering Woman summit. You just need to not trust male feminists.
Yeah, I mean, if you're overly vocal about how much you support women and you're better than other men and you're such a nice guy, I think that should be a red flag to all of the women who work with you that you might be toxic and you don't have a normal relationship with women.
There's a lot of people mentioning in the chat that Firefly is still great. Yes, Firefly, the TV show, is still great. Joss Whedon still did great work early on. He's just a scumbag, and that's just the industry. It is what it is. It's like Bryan Singer's still working. Bryan Singer's worse.
There are a lot of scumbags in Hollywood, most of which I bet aren't exposed yet to the public. So the only option you have is to just assume the worst, right?
Here's a fun fact. Did you know that Jewel Staite in that show had to put, like, she was so skinny, they made her put on weight to do that show. Like, she had to, like, not eat healthy and like, live unhealthily, like, to play that role.
Wow, I've never heard a story like that.
Well, I'm saying back then, that would have been unheard of.
Right.
Crazy.
That's funny.
Also, from what I understand, like, all of those actors, like Nathan Fillion, Morena Baccarin, Jewel Staite, and the others, all, Gina Torres, all still have, like, rules in their contracts when they go to new shows that if something moves on Firefly, they can get out of their contract so they can go back to work on it because they loved working on it so much. Like, so, like, whatever they're on now, there's some rule in there. It's like, I get out if a Firefly project moves forward with us. And from what I understand, we did a video early days of this channel, that Disney has the rights to Firefly now because they bought 20th Century Fox. So you know that it's just going to be awful if they end up following through on that.
Yeah, so let's hope they don't.
Also, that's early Adam Baldwin, the amazing Adam Baldwin.
I forget
Gamergate's
that he exists.
Adam Baldwin.
Gamergate. Yeah, I forget that he coined that.
So guys, don't listen to male feminists and understand that it is a cutthroat work environment, and I don't think it really has anything to do with women supporting women. I don't think the men are any more supportive. It's not that they're not supportive of men. I think the men would categorize as that. It's not that I'm not supportive of you. It's that I'm putting my own interests first.
Well, it's funny when these actresses get older and more established in their careers, and then they come out and say that they've found solidarity with other women in the industry.
Or the career's on the downturn.
You found solidarity with other women in your industry when the stakes got lower, when the competition faded out.
And now when it's financially beneficial for you to give these interviews and talk about how toxic everything was back then. Thanks for watching this clip, guys. If you want to see full episodes or follow us on social media, links are in the description below. Bye.